In today's video, we delve into the alarming implications of recent policy changes that have effectively reopened the gates for pollution across the United States. As we analyze the rollback of key environmental protections under the Trump administration, we'll explore the scrapping of the Clean Power Plan, weakened methane regulations, and significant cuts to the EPA. From auctions of federal lands to diminished auto emissions standards, it's clear that fossil fuel industries are celebrating a new era of unchecked environmental degradation. Join us as we uncover the impact of these decisions on air and water quality, and what this means for the future of our planet. 1. Environmental protections rolled back. During President Trump's tenure, a significant rollback of over 100 environmental protections occurred, paving the way for industries to pollute with fewer restrictions. This sweeping change was not just a minor adjustment, it was a complete overhaul of existing safeguards that had been in place for decades. Industries that had once been bound by stringent regulations found themselves operating in a much more lenient environment. With fewer checks and balances in place, the door was opened wide for increased pollution. The result was an emboldened fossil fuel sector, eager to capitalize on these newfound freedoms. 2. The Clean Power Plan scrapped. The Clean Power Plan, designed to reduce carbon emissions from power plants, was scrapped under Trump's administration. This plan aimed to cut emissions by encouraging a shift towards renewable energy sources and away from coal. However, the rollback meant coal plants could continue operating without the pressure to clean up their act. Instead of moving towards a cleaner future, the focus shifted back to coal, a move that drew criticism from environmental advocates. This decision was seen as a step backward in the fight against climate change, allowing coal plants to operate with fewer restrictions and more profits. 3. Weakened methane regulations. Methane, a potent greenhouse gas, saw its regulations weakened, allowing oil and gas companies to release more into the atmosphere. Previously, strict regulations were in place to monitor and limit methane emissions, a critical component in battling climate change. However, under the new policies, these companies faced fewer constraints, resulting in increased emissions. The decision was celebrated by the fossil fuel industry but raised alarm bells among environmentalists. The long-term impact of this deregulation on global warming was predicted to be significant, with methane being over 25 times more effective than carbon dioxide at trapping heat in the atmosphere. 4. Federal lands and waters auctioned off. Trump's administration auctioned off vast areas of federal lands and waters to oil and gas companies, putting previously protected areas at risk. These lands, often home to diverse ecosystems and wildlife, were suddenly opened up for exploration and drilling. Conservationists were alarmed as areas that had been off-limits for decades were now vulnerable. The move was seen as prioritizing short-term economic gains over long-term environmental preservation. The auction signaled a shift in how natural resources were valued, with economic exploitation taking precedence over ecological conservation. 5. EPA funding cuts and staff reductions. The Environmental Protection Agency, EPA, experienced significant funding cuts and staff reductions, weakening its ability to enforce pollution laws. As a key agency responsible for protecting the environment, the EPA's diminished capacity was a major blow to environmental oversight. With fewer resources and personnel, the agency struggled to maintain its regulatory duties. The cuts were part of a broader agenda to reduce government intervention in industries. However, the consequences were felt in the form of increased pollution and reduced accountability for those contributing to environmental degradation. 6. Auto emissions standards rolled back. Auto emissions standards were rolled back, allowing car manufacturers to produce more gas-guzzling vehicles. These standards had previously pushed the automotive industry towards more fuel-efficient and environmentally friendly technologies. However, the rollback meant manufacturers could revert to producing vehicles with lower fuel efficiency. This change was viewed as a setback for efforts to reduce emissions from one of the largest sources of pollution, transportation. The decision allowed for an increase in greenhouse gas emissions, contributing further to global warming. 7. U.S. withdrawal from the Paris Climate Agreement. In a move that shocked the international community, Trump withdrew the U.S. from the Paris Climate Agreement. This agreement was a landmark effort to unite countries in combating climate change. By withdrawing, the U.S. signaled a retreat from its role as a global leader in environmental issues. The withdrawal was criticized by world leaders and environmentalists alike, as the U.S. is one of the largest contributors to carbon emissions. The decision highlighted a shift in priorities towards domestic economic interests, at the expense of global environmental collaboration. 8. Fossil fuel industry subsidies. The fossil fuel industry received billions in subsidies, while clean energy projects faced budget cuts and regulatory hurdles. These subsidies provided a financial cushion for fossil fuel companies, allowing them to expand operations and increase profits. Meanwhile, renewable energy initiatives that could have advanced cleaner alternatives were stifled. The disparity in support highlighted a clear preference for traditional energy sources over innovative and sustainable solutions. This approach raised concerns about the long-term viability of energy policies and their impact on the environment. 9. Decline in air and water quality. Public health risks increased as air and water quality declined due to deregulated pollution controls. With fewer regulations, industries discharged pollutants into the air and water, impacting communities nationwide. The decline in environmental quality was not only a concern for ecosystems but also for human health, as pollutants posed serious risks. Residents in affected areas reported an increase in respiratory issues and other health problems. The rollback of pollution controls was seen as a direct threat to public health, with long-term consequences yet to be fully realized. 10. Celebration among fossil fuel companies. Coal, gas, and oil companies celebrated Trump's policies, as profits soared while environmental protections crumbled. The deregulation allowed these industries to operate with fewer constraints, leading to increased production and revenue. Executives lauded the administration for its pro-business stance, which prioritized economic growth over environmental concerns. The celebration within the fossil fuel sector was met with dismay by environmentalists, who saw it as a triumph of profit over planet. The shift in policy underscored a broader debate about the balance between economic development and environmental stewardship.